This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
And thanks for tuning into another episode of Power Athlete Radio. This week we are joined by coach, lifter, musician, and legend Jim Wendler. Jim was nice enough to indulge us for a lengthy conversation about his training ethos and its origins. We discuss the culture of sports and how unique the team dynamic really is, and Jim appropriately makes note of, and I'm paraphrasing here, how the people outside the culture try to dictate how the culture should behave. After some football reminiscing, we have to explain to Jim just how an up-down is really called a burpee now, and that people actually voluntarily do them for conditioning. His response, of course, is priceless. If you're like me, you're probably wondering what Jim thinks about the popularity of the now widely used 5-3-1 method. Find out what he really thinks about the implementation, and how he navigates questions like, can you 5-3-1 wall balls? Finally, hear what's new with Jim and what is on his agenda for 2015. Get your pencil and paper ready to jot down some of the most quotable Wendlerisms, including this one. Quote, most of your problems would be solved if you just took a shit and thought about it for 10 seconds. Yep, that and much more to come on Power Athlete Radio.
What's happening, Power Athlete Nation? It's time. Power Athlete Radio in effect. We got the Power Athlete coaches, John, Luke, Tex, and Callie. And today we have special guest, Mr. Jim Wendler.
We're not worthy.
John, you and Jim have some history.
Yeah, we went to different high schools together. I met Jim about 4 years ago. We were connected with our other favorite guest, Mark Ripto, and Rip kept talking about Jim Wendler, how great he was, and I had to meet him. So when I went out to Westside Barbell when Louis was starting his certification, he called me up and wanted us to go out there. So I drug Nate to go with me because I figured Nate would be like I could just throw him to the guys at Westside. And they'd probably just share him like a young criminal coming into the pen for the first time. So I brought Nate with me, and then I was able to connect with Jim. He lived about 45 minutes, hour outside Columbus, and he drove in. We had dinner and a bunch of drinks, and he slipped Nate a roofie, and the rest is history.
Cocky history.
Yeah, shit got a little weird. I mean, Nate was okay with it. He still won't talk about it, but you know what? Fuck it. He had a great experience.
You're still paying for his therapy, right?
Yeah, well, But it was cool to connect with him, and ever since then we've been we would bullshit back and forth. But since Jim just had another kid and I had twins, it seems like all of a sudden I was like, dude, it's been like 3 or 4 years since I've seen him. So it's just a trip how time flies.
I don't know if you remember this, John, but when we were having dinner, some guy went up to you and asked you if you played football or something. I don't remember what it was, and you lied and said you went to so and so college or high school. And it was the college, I think. He's like, holy shit, dude, I went there too.
I was like, once again, I fucking get caught in the lie.
Amazing.
I think he also asked us, he's like, hey, do you guys lift weights?
Yeah, I always.
I remember the look on Jim's face as he just turned his head and gave him the fucking Spock eyebrow. I was like, oh, this is gonna get.
What did you tell? What college? You say I played football at Oxford.
I'm pretty sure I used that same line. He's like, hey, how do you guys know each other? I'm like, we went to different high schools together. And he's like, oh yeah, what high school? And I was like,
some random Washington.
I was like, Martin Luther King, Eastern College. I mean, high school of South. And a guy like, oh, I went there too. And we're like, mother of God. And then I think his next question was, do you guys CrossFit? And Jim was like, well, yeah, I was, won the CrossFit Games in 1984.
I remember that. I remember those games. So, Jim, what was your first impression of John?
Well, he's fucking huge. That's my first. You know what the funny thing is you get out of football a little bit, and you miss the camaraderie, not so much the sense of humor, because no one gets it. You know, who was that guy from the Dolphins who got
Richie Incognito.
Yeah, and people are like, can you believe that shit goes on? And I was like, holy, that's all day, every day, and they act like it, like they have a right to know what goes on in the locker room, like the media has the right to police that shit, and it drove me bananas. But it was like that. It was because I felt like I was back at home again. Because you say stuff, if it's not even like 50% of the shit that goes on in the locker room, you can't say it's 99%. And when the incognito thing came out, I can't believe people were so surprised. I was like, dude, that's been going around like since you're in junior high. That's just the way it is.
Well, of course, I
love when people outside of the culture try to tell you what your culture should be like.
Well, it's like a rite of passage. Like part of playing football is like there's like this kind of ball busting mentality, and like the best is he's like, hey, I'm gonna fuck your sister and your mother, and hey, what time are we working out tomorrow? Yeah. And people were like, oh, if he would have said that to me, I'm like.
That means you're in. That means you can do. It's like when a coach stops yelling at you. That's when you got to worry. When you stop busting your balls, you're like, Christ, did I find my weird porn and whatnot?
Well, it's good to see it's translated to the work scenario.
Yeah, because every once in a while we'll get a compliment from John.
I'm like,
are we?
Yeah, we're fired.
Are we fired now?
I was like, no, you guys have done a
I don't
terrible
even have a
job.
sister.
It's like, hey guys, I want you to go outside, brush your teeth with a 45, and come back with a big hole in your fucking head. Go. But no, I mean that's just kind of the culture you grow up in, and I think like definitely when you get out of it, like people necessarily aren't ready for it, so you got to kind of tone it down, and then all of a sudden you have a couple drinks, and it's like running into your old buddies or something, and next thing you know you're just fucking busting balls. So
what's interesting too is you could see this in just in my aspect. I grew up. My dad was a coach. And I grew up playing sports my whole life, and there is no bullshitting, at least not with the coaches I dealt with my whole life. It's pretty black and white. They tell you exactly how it is. And if you do that on the internet, you're a dick. If someone says, this and that, you're like, quit fucking complaining, dude. Sack it up and fucking get out there and do what you need to do. And then they get mad at you because they think you're being mean. But John, you tell me, how many times has a coach coddled you at all? That's just how you grow up.
I told these guys when I was a freshman in college, I was sitting in a meeting and the coach walked in and he was pretty upset. We could tell, as my offensive line coach, and he brought in a dictionary. He set his stuff down. He was kind of like pacing back and forth, which wasn't good. And we're all kind of like sitting there a little nervous, like what the fuck's going to happen. He picks up the dictionary and like a big Webster's dictionary. And there's a guy sitting 5, 6, 7 feet from him. He takes the dictionary and literally throws it as hard as he can, like a frisbee, at the guy's fucking head. And the guy like bails out of the way. The fucking dictionary goes through the wall, dents the wall, and like everybody like kind of stops. And he's like, starts screaming. He's like, if you want fucking sympathy in this room, it's in the dictionary, right between shit and syphilis. And started fucking yelling at the guy. And and the next thing out of his mouth was, I'm going to tear off your fucking balls so you can't reproduce, to poison the world with this fucking level of play so that nobody else will play this poorly.
The most surprising part is that there was a dictionary in that room with a bunch of...
Well, yeah, nobody ever opened it because, between shit and syphilis, nobody even knew what syphilis was. Everybody knew what shit was.
Dude, that's a line from the Breakfast Club. Remember that? That's what frickin' Vernon told Bender. That he's looking for sympathy, it's between shit and syphilis.
They stole that from Tom Cable.
Yeah, that was... So
that's how it worked.
This is, same Tom Cable, who ended up going on to be the Oakland Raiders coach as offensive line coach.
And the writer for Breakfast Club.
For the Seahawks. He's a bad dude. But, that was kind of like one of those deals where, in college it's a little bit different because you have a scholarship. Like, they really can't fire you. They'll just, like, fucking hate on you until you quit. Where in the NFL, like, I was sitting in a meeting where a guy fucking fucked up a block, a young guy, and made an excuse, and the coach looked at his watch and was like, you know what, I want you to go up see the general manager, take your playbook, I don't ever want to fucking see your face again. And that guy's job was over. And but that's the cold, hard world of the real world. But Jim gets on the internet and calls somebody like, hey, why don't you fucking man up and do something, and next thing you know, he's an asshole.
Yeah, it's a I don't know if it's more of it praised, or if it's more of a sign of the times. Maybe things have changed. I don't know. I don't know what it's like coaching anymore either. I don't, who the fuck knows, but it's funny. It's just a totally different way I was raised. I think maybe a lot of us were raised. I always tell people that if I won the Heisman Trophy in the lottery in the same day, my dad would barely break a smile. He's just like, you should have fucking done it. Like, what?
Well, it's the idea that there was like this kind of like kind and gentle, kind and gentle didn't necessarily exist, and it seems like today, like people are, from the comfort of their basements or their garage, they can like comfortably get involved in this thing, and people are fucking sensitive, dude.
Well, yeah, and the thing is too, like if you want to insert yourself into a sport culture, you're probably not gonna get coddled, and you shouldn't expect to get coddled. If you want to stay on the fringe and on the outskirts and work within like some other discipline, and you want to be good at something else, then you might be coddled and you might be treated differently. But that's just not how competition works.
Jim, I remember reading an article you wrote called "The Walk On." So yeah. I think this conversation ties well into that. Can you kind of say, from your perspective, how do you break into that mold from the outside?
Well, I mean, it's understand that I was playing football all the way up until then too. Before I walked on in Arizona, I obviously played in high school, and I went to the Air Force Academy. So I was already part of the culture. But the walk-on article was the hardest thing I've ever had to do emotionally. And John, obviously you were a scholarship athlete. You played in the pros. He comes from a little different mindset. But when John will back it up. As a walk-on until John can earn his stripes, so to say, maybe his freshman year. If he keeps his mouth shut, gets in a couple fights, and finish off a keg by himself. That's pretty good. As a walk-on, you got to earn your stripes for 3 or 4 years before anyone really, even the coaches don't really accept you because you're not one of their guys. But there's a lot of points. In fact, my wife and I were just talking about that article about how coaches always tell you football is like life, and you're like, Jesus Christ, I don't want to be running sprints my whole fucking life, doing up downs because I missed a block. But the one thing I learned is, one of the many things is, and this maybe doesn't really tie into the question, is, if you're the starting quarterback, if you're Johnny Manziel, you're treated differently, and you should be treated differently than the guy who sucks like me, because you offer something. You have worth. And people think that if they don't have worth, they should be treated exactly the same. Well, you don't, and that's just part of life. That's just the way it is, whether you like it or not. I learned that really early. If I'm late to a meeting, I'm booted. Like John said, if that guy made the young kid you were talking about who bitched about the missing the block, if that's Tony Vaselli, the coach is like, well, you probably had a hell of a reason, Tony, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way it is, and you learn very quickly that you have to earn it. You have to earn the right to get to be part of something. You have to earn the right to get a little respect. It's not given, and it should never be given. I don't care what anyone says.
Two things. One, Jim, you just dated yourself, because I'm probably one of the only people sitting here that actually knows who Tony Vaselli is in that reference. So I
thought of the best left tackle I could think of, and obviously Vaselli is, besides maybe Munoz, I guess.
He was, but Vaselli was my host on a recruiting trip to USC.
Oh, okay. And what's up with this? Dude, he had the smallest shoulder pads in the NFL. You notice that?
Yeah, no, they were tiny, and I always wondered if that contributed to all of his shoulder problems. But
that dude was just, his reach was unbelievable. I remember seeing him play and just
his hips,
just marvel.
It was crazy. Like his shoulders were probably 50 inches, and his waist was probably like a 48. But he wasn't fat. He was so wide. It was crazy. I remember looking at this dude and being like, this guy looks like a milk carton with long arms. And he was a
great discus thrower with those arms and that kind of build.
Yeah, he was a beast. And the other thing too is up downs are now called burpees.
Oh.
And they've gone from being a punishment tool to a conditioning tool, which is something inherently fucking destroys me every day. That I'm like, people.
Someone asked me if I do up downs or if I recommend them, and I just had this horrible flashback. It was like a Holocaust victim, like, oh no, I didn't miss the fucking block, and I didn't. Oh, and it's funny because we did. I'm never, how your coaches all get together after a practice or a game, and they all get mad at you. Even if you win, if you win by too much, they need to bring you back. We did something like 225 up downs on a Sunday practice, the day after the game.
I got into a fight in training camp in college, and Tom Cable, we weren't supposed to fight, and it was like 101 pass pro, and like this fucking, actually I think it was a walk-on defensive lineman beat one of our starting left guard, and I was playing right tackle, and I fucking started yelling at the dude, and he like said something to me, so being the fact that he was a walk-on and he beat our starter, I felt that it was my responsibility to fucking take him down a peg or two, So in 101 pass pro, as he's walking back, I fucking run and like forearm in the side of the head and basically fucking beat his ass. And I got thrown out of practice. And my punishment was 800 yards of up downs every 5 yards. So if for anybody listening doesn't know what an up down is, you basically you're in your full gear, you run, and every 5 yards on every line marker, you drop down and fucking drop your chest to the ground, do a push up, jump up, and you keep running. And we ended up with 800 yards of up downs, which was over 100. Yeah.
I missed a spring practice one time, and I did up downs for 400, and I had a log roll for 200. And it was funny because the coaches asked me, like, why you've never missed a practice? What happened? And the honest to God, I said I fucked up the AM PM on my alarm clock, and the coaches, they felt like it was funny because they got to dish out the punishment, but they talked to me the whole time, like a normal conversation, like I was going to be able to. And they're asking me workout advice. You guys should do this and that. I'm like,
dude, there's something inherently comforting about wearing all those pads and just fucking slamming yourself into the ground and getting up and running. I remember, those are good times. You wear that shit like a badge of honor. But I always laugh, dude. Like people talk about like burpees and they're doing them, and I'm like, oh god. I'm like, the fact that like people voluntarily do those and use those as a conditioning exercise. I'm like every guy that ever played fucking football in their life is like, like throwing up a little in your mouth.
It's one of those things that whoever enjoys up downs didn't play sports. That's just the way it is. That's like an indicator, a litmus test,
Hey, or you're 5'7" and just really good at them.
Yeah, no one. Even then, if there was an Olympic event now, it's the best ever. I still wouldn't fucking do them.
So, in keeping with like the training, the conditioning, the punishment. I mean, what was your impression now, well, I guess, looking back on your weight room experience and your strength training experience for college football?
Well, I should probably note that when I first started, I started training the summer prior to my 8th grade year, okay? And so I went over to the high school. My dad was a AD at the high school, and I was still in junior high, so I went over there and lifted. He had the key and everything. And during my time there, I had a really good mentor, Darren Llewellyn. And so he showed me basically stuff that, everyone's still kind of discovering today. We did a ton of box jumps, tons of bounding over high hurdles. We always squatted. We did a ton of med ball stuff. So by the time I got to college, I was well versed in what I thought and what is widely considered a fairly well-rounded program. And it's interesting, too, you talk about coaching. Darren didn't say a word to me for the first year. Not one word. And I tried, I just worked my ass off. And I asked him eventually why. And he said, well, because you got to earn the right to fucking talk. I'm not going to waste my breath on some guy who's just a, fly-by-night athlete. So, but that's another whole story. By the time I got to college, I thought I had a pretty good base. But things are a little bit different now. Things are much more structured in college football. When I was playing, I was very lucky. My strength coach in college, because I had such a love of strength training, that's all I've ever wanted to do, was as long as I operated within some reasonable bounds, he let me experiment. So that's a lot of shit went down that I, fucked up or got to try, and he was full, 100% supportive. And because he knew, like, I don't know, John, you probably can understand this, is, a lot of guys don't want to lift weights,
No, very few.
So then you get an athlete come in there who's fucking gung-ho, not just about lifting, but about learning about lifting, about the little stuff. It's one thing to be like, yeah, I like lifting weights. It's one thing to want to be a master of it, of everything. And so he was more than open to, to me doing some other shit that, maybe he didn't program, and I'd run it by him. And he said, dude, you got to learn how to train yourself. You're going to have to learn how to experiment, and now's the time. So I was very fortunate.
Was this at Arizona?
Yeah, this is at Arizona.
Dude, who was that like Desert Storm, flex defense, Rob? Who was that big defensive fucking tackle?
Aldridge. I'll tell you a good story about Rob. I learned a lot. Rob had graduated by then, and he came back. He was playing with the Chiefs, I believe. And I don't know if John, have you ever seen Rob in person?
Yeah, I played against him.
Okay, he's maybe 6 foot if he's lucky, right?
Yeah, we used to get him at like 5'10", but he was easily 275.
Yeah, he was not fat, and his legs. People think they've seen large quads and large ass. Holy shit! And I remember him. He came in there and he was squatting, and there must have been little over 600 pounds in the bar. And everyone that had already been there and known Rob, everyone shut up. And then some asshole was like, "Come on, Rob, you can do it!" Being like an asshole cheerleader. There's nothing worse than a cheerleader in the weight room. And Rob turned around and just sat there and glared at this dude until he shut up. And the whole weight room went silent. He did his set, and that was it. But I learned an important lesson, like, you don't want to talk about the cheerleaders and rah-rah guys. They're always the weakest dudes with the most to say. And,
sounds like the internet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I saw a guy who was focused and who didn't need, 900 pounds of ammonia and didn't need to watch the movie 300, a million times before he fucking lifted or, whatever the hell people do. I don't even know.
Well, it's actually the head through the glass and the spit in the mouth and, the seat at the table that you got to fucking do. That's my other. I'm like, dude, if you got to go watch the program and fucking put your head through a piece of glass and do the seat at the table and spit in my mouth.
What was that guy's name from the program? What was the
Latimer. The best. Dude, and then that was fucking Teddy Bruschi. That was, they created that whole flex defense. I remember like watching that on film and being like, hey, this year we're going to do it different. We're going to attack the flex. And I remember them saying that. And I remember everybody like looking at each other in the meeting and being like, are you fucking insane?
Just to give people a point of reference, in 1992, I believe, Arizona played in the Fiesta Bowl. I wasn't there at that time. And they played Miami.
Yeah.
Miami wasn't the same Miami, but they were still really good. Miami didn't cross the 50-yard line all game.
That was post Jimmy Johnson, but they were still wearing the fucking battle fatigues and like that was. So I was a freshman in '94, and then that was,
Desert Storm, I would be willing to bet Rob Waldrop was the heaviest guy at 275.
Yeah.
I mean, our Teddy was a D end, and he played middle linebacker with the Patriots. Our safety Brandon Sanders maybe 155.
Yeah.
If you're lucky. And all these guys did was fucking hit, and they had no problem. There wouldn't be a guy in the Desert Storm defense that would, if they played in the NFL, they'd be out $1 million on hits. I mean,
well, for you guys listening that don't know what it is, they had this defense where they used to play Rob off the line probably about 2 yards, so it was kind of wacky, and they called it the flex defense. And I guess I don't know what the fucking deal was, but those guys brought it, and it was kind of crappy. It was crazy to watch because normally you see like a shade, a 3 technique, a 5, whatever, up on the line, and then all of a sudden here's this fucking 5'10", 275-pound D tackle that had incredible lateral speed.
Yeah, he won the Outland
Trophy. Like 3 feet off the line in a 3-point.
Yeah, he won the Outland Trophy award to give. He wasn't a flash in the pan. That whole the funny thing about that defense, or that whole team, was they were all guys who had Division I talent but didn't have Division I height or weight. And these guys, it was like taking a bunch of angry kids who didn't get scholarships other than Arizona, and they all put them on the same team. And they all had a huge chip on their shoulder. And, Bruschi was maybe 240, 250. And even then, that's small for a D-end.
Yeah, he was a beast in the NFL. They were smart when they kind of moved him to that outside backer and like let him play in the middle. I mean, he was Teddy could hit, and always was. Every time I played against him, I always knew it was fucking big collision. So that dude would fucking brought it for years.
But it's just a really I was at a tail end. Bruschi played his senior year was my first year there, and. The weird thing is, Teddy was obviously All-American probably 2 years in a row, and, I think at the time he tied Derek Brooks for the most sacks ever. I don't know if that's been broken. But to give you an idea, Teddy wouldn't recognize me. I was a walk-on freshman. But that dude, I'd go to parties all the time, and I'd see him, and he always knew me by name. And even when he was drafted and did well, he'd come back, and he'd always talk, and he was always a cool dude. And honestly, John Fina, who played for the Bills, was the same way. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, no, I did. I know what John Fina is real well.
And John knows this well too. There's no one smarter in the world who plays football than offensive linemen, and Fina was no exception. There's just something about you guys that their intelligence. Besides, I would say the quarterback. You have to be the smartest playing O-line, especially the center, making all the calls. But
well, that's why I always joke, the dumbest guys in the field are usually the defensive linemen, and our job is to nearly outsmart them every time we walk up to the line. I mean, dummy calls, fucking stupid shit. I mean,
this will be edited because it has nothing to do with anything. Do you remember the guy at Cal? I think he was a tight end or a D end who was so goddamn big and fast they had him as a gunner on punt team.
John McLaughlin.
Did he ever end up playing in the pros? Did he get hurt or something?
Yeah, so Johnny Mac was I played in the Shrine game with him in high school. He went to Notre Dame, and he was a receiver tight end, and they 105, 110 pounds, played a little D end. They asked him to play outside backer, and he ended up getting up to about 245, 250, but he could still run like a 10-300.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And then when he transferred to Cal after that?
Yeah. He transferred to Cal and was the gunner on our punt team, and still had like his 10-300 speed at like 245, and would fly down and just fucking annihilate people. Yeah, he got drafted, or he got signed like late round draft pick. He went in and was like I want to say he was like a Pro Bowl alternate, or made the Pro Bowl like either his first or second year for Tampa Bay. And you're gonna love this. I lived down in Tampa at the time, so I used to train with him, and he was actually one of my training partners, oddly enough. And we were supposed to, after practice, he's like, hey, I'm going to go to the beach with these girls. You want to go? And I was like, I can't make it today. We're going to do something later. He's like, oh, no problem, dude. He was at the beach, and he was showing off for these broads, like running and basically like hitting the wave and doing flips. And he, when he fucking went over on a wave, I guess he didn't rotate enough, or landed on the back of his neck and fucking herniated a disc in his neck on the sandbar. And ended up getting fucking released and cut, and now I think he's a DJ in Houston, Texas. I see him on Facebook, and like he's like, yeah, I'm DJing tonight at this place, and I'm like, that dude should have played 10 years in the NFL, and like, I mean, he was
very clearly the women's fault for.
I would agree.
Well, he
prompting him to show off.
Well, like, dude, and Jim will co-sign on this because he's seen it too from like. Like whether, like training, football, all this shit that we've been involved in, your friends that are usually like the best are usually like the most reckless. So like that, they go out like, and it's like, how did this guy get fucking caught doing 120 in his car with like a gun and a fucking pound of blow? And I'm like, reckless people. I mean, those are the type of people
extreme personalities.
Yeah, extreme personalities do extreme shit.
Sure. There was a guy that was very much like, was it McLaughlin, you said? I won't say what school he went to because he was similar build, probably a little taller, 6'6", about 260, and just shredded, fast as fuck, just explosive, everything. And he was like a black belt and a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, he was absolutely crazy. And he got booted off the team he was on because he, during the spring game, he roundhouse kicked the special teams coach in the head. But I'll never forget this. He carried a gun all the time. And remember, this guy's, the physical specimen that no one would ever fuck with, right? And his friend asked him, why the fuck would you carry a gun? He's like, anyone dumb enough to mess with me is crazy.
He has a point.
Well, we had, another one of my best friends in the world, which is ironic that all the craziest people are usually my best friends. Like the weirdo sees me and he's like, "What's up?" I'm like, "We're friends." We had Kyle Turley on the podcast, and Kyle is,
I remember Kyle. I played against Kyle Turley.
Yeah, San Diego State. So yeah, Kyle and I played together at the Chiefs. We were training partners for years. I mean, I was in his wedding, and Kyle was telling the story about him choking out his head coach.
Yeah, that was awesome. He said the way he phrased it was, so naturally I started choking him out.
Right. So Kyle's
like, step was
yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
like the guy said something, and he's like, and so then I fucking choked him out. Like, what else was I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And
he was so nonchalant about it. I was like,
it was great. And and anybody that knows Kyle knows that like that's no bullshit. Like I remember when Kyle signed, was like in his, I think I was in my second year, Kyle was in his third. We were in San Diego for some fucking, like the NFL always has these like guys have golf tournaments. Yeah. Which is like code name for like, hey, let's go play golf and get fucked up and do stupid shit.
Spend a lot of money on a quote unquote charity event.
Yeah,
golfing.
Yeah, golfing. Yeah. It's like jogging, right? Like, I fucking hate golf. Like, golfing is like jogging to me. Like, nobody fucking should golf. But so Kyle and I were in San Diego, and Kyle's like, hey, let's go for a ride. So we get in his brand new SC or whatever, 600 Mercedes V12 shit, and we get out on the highway, and he's pissed off because the governor shut the car down at 185. So we get on the whatever, like the San Diego freeway or whatever. We're in San Diego. I forgot what freeway it was. I think it was the 805. He fucking stomps on it, and we're like, like 160. I'm like looking over. I'm like, fuck.
Is that a car part of the governor?
Yeah. So like the car like wouldn't go over 185, and he's fucking stomping it, going, this fucking piece of shit won't go faster than 185. This fucking
Jesus.
like losing his fucking mind that his V12 Mercedes won't do 186 miles an hour. And
he's a spicy man.
Yeah, he's an angry human. I love Kyle. He's the best. So that was par for the course. And when Kyle and I played together in Kansas City, he would drive over and pick me up every morning because he needed somebody to talk to him in the morning so he could like get his mind right and not kill somebody at work. He had a lot of anger issues.
People want the NFL players to be great on the field, but they don't want to know, or they get mad when they figure out that they're fucking crazy.
Right, or what's fueling that that fire?
Well,
they can't just walk off the field and and I don't know anything what John can experience, and I'm sure John can even say, well, I don't even know, even what Emmitt Smith or something. But when you walk out onto a stadium for 20 years and there's 100,000 people chanting your name, you're going to have a little bit of an ego.
No.
And people don't understand that. Like, well, when you go to work, does 100,000 people show up and pay $200 a head so they can chant your name?
That's an excellent point. No, they do not.
Yeah.
There's two types of people in football, and somebody asked me this once. They were like, "Oh, are you gonna miss all the people, or are you gonna miss all the crowds and all the cheering?" And I got kind of sad in that, and then I told him, I was like, I never heard the crowd, and I never never heard the noise. And this is, I don't know, maybe it was just the way I'm wired up or the brain or whatever, but from the minute I ran through the tunnel to the end of the game, I never heard anything. Everything just sounded silent to me. And I never heard the crowd cheer. I never heard any of that shit. Everything just sounded like quiet, like a pin drop. And when they asked me, they were like, "You gonna miss it?" And I'm like, I never fucking heard it. And they were kind of gave me, I told them that, and they're like, "How is that possible?" I'm like, I was so fucking hyper focused on what my task was, and I live, and I still to this day have this fear of failure. Like people like, "Oh, I don't want." I'm like, dude, I fucking wakes me up at the night the thought of failure, and having to walk on a field where you get to prove exactly how good or bad are you every Sunday, 70 fucking times in front of millions of people with your name on the back. Like my name, Wellborn, was on the back, so there was no fucking hiding. Like that shit will keep you up at night, and
think
I just
about
never heard the crowd.
Players today, they got to deal with the idiocy of social media, where everyone gets to have an opinion even if they shouldn't have one, and that's dealt a whole nother hand of talk about fear of failure.
Yeah, it's the thing is everyone's always had an opinion, but now everyone has a platform where other people somehow value bullshit opinions, and so
I just wrote. I'm writing a book for my sons, and I wrote a section called "How Not to Be an Asshole."
I hope it's a big section.
Yeah, well, it's just a whole bunch of them. One of the points was you're right. You have every right to have an opinion, but you don't have the right to express it. Your mouth, because I guess here's the thing: if someone asks me a question and then you're going to answer it, but if no one asks you a question, then shut up.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Yep. If nobody asks you for your opinion,
people think they're way too important.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, hasn't the internet really like given the voice to to people? I mean, we deal with this every day, and like I was thinking like this guy was like, oh, how did you get your start in training? And I was like, I was just really fortunate that the old power lifter that lived close to us was the U.S. powerlifting coach, and we would go over and lift in his fucking garage, and he trained like Bill Kazmaier and these guys, and I've talked about George Zangus. And his godson was a guy named Tasso Papadakis, and Tasso was like the strongest dude under 16 years old in America. He squatted like 500 for 10 and was just a monster, and like played at USC, played fullback and linebacker. His brother played too, and he's on a local TV station around here, does some stuff. But Papadakis.
Yeah, the fullback. His brother was a fullback, right?
Yeah, he was a fullback, and Tasso was he was a year older than me, and when I was I started lifting weights as a freshman in high school, and got thrown into a program, and it wasn't until that second year when I met him, he actually rolled up on me and he's like, hey, you're gonna be my training partner, and I was like, really? This guy's fucking huge, and that's who showed me how to lift weights. We lifted weights at lunch and fifth period, and we go play football, or we would do football practice at sixth period. But the problem was I had class fifth period, and so I was like, he's like, well, this is when we lift weights. I'm like, but I have class. He's like, you're gonna have to get rid of it. So I went in and I ended up having to take zero fucking period, which was started at 7 a.m. So I had to get my mom to drive me and drop me off at fucking 6:45 in the morning, which she wasn't happy about. And she was like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, because I want to lift weights with these guys. And she's like, all right. So I ended up taking zero periods so I could train with these guys, and then I went over and that's, fucking trained at Zangus, trained at this. That's really what got me in my start in lifting weights. And I think like, at the time I was like, all right, well, I got to get rid of this class. So I went in, I was like, hey, I don't want a fit period anymore. And the lady's like, the only way you're not going to get fit period is to get zero period. And I'm like, all right, well, fuck, if that's what you got to do, I want to lift weights. And, but now it's like, oh, I don't have enough time. Oh, my class, it's like all these fucking excuses, and I'm always
like,
you
talking about stuff on the comments on?
Well, just in general, like everybody always wants an excuse, and like even as like a 15-year-old kid, I was like, all right, well, if I just got to wake up an hour earlier and make it fucking happen, I'll make it happen.
The interesting thing is, there's, someone had remarked after I wrote the walk-on article, or no, I wrote an article called Mentoring Wendler. And I talked all about Darren, the guy from high school who was a teacher and coach. And people responded, instead of saying, oh, that's a great story, they said, oh, I would be just like you if I had someone like that. And I sat there and said, you know how many kids went through that fucking high school with Darren? And how am I the only one? And part of it is, and I talked about this in the walk-on article, you have to be receptive and you have to be ready. The only reason why I got a scholarship at Arizona, there's only one reason, was we had on Thursdays before the game, all the guys who were, weren't playing, we called it a scout bowl because the kids from the scout team played, okay? And all the scholarship kids at that time during this one scout bowl, they all left. They didn't think they thought they were too good for it, okay? And so my offensive coordinator at the time, Dino Babers, who's at Bowling Green now, he's the head guy there, said, all right, Jimmy, fucking strap it up, let's go. And you guys and John will know, when you're playing a scout bowl, you don't pass a lot because you don't have there's no timing between the guys. You can't do any side adjusts or anything like that, so you just run the ball. And there's no teams, there's just offense and defense. So I carried the ball 8,000 times. I split my head open, so I looked really like a black metal musician on stage, blood everywhere. And the coach's like, dude, you showed up, you gave effort, and I was ready at the time. I took advantage of that one opportunity I had. That was it. And the same thing with Darren. I worked Darren didn't say a fucking word to me. And remember, I'm in 8th grade. Everyone else is in high school. It's very intimidating, but I just kept my head down and trained. And then I earned the right through hard work and I was receptive to him, and we still stay in contact. He's the only person I really go to for for bigger stuff outside of training besides my father. But it's funny because, like they'll say something like, well, John, you had that guy. Well, yeah, but I had to make shit happen. How many other guys were part of that? Did he, and you just made the sacrifices and did what was necessary because you're it's amazing how, the luck, the hard-working people get a lot of luck,
Well, I mean, dude, I was fortunate. Tasso was all world, and Cal High Sports, which was a local sports magazine, wrote a big deal about him, and all these scouts showed up to play. And at the time, I was playing guard, and our tackle was like 6'8", like fucking 300 pounds, and all the teams showed up to see him, and they were like, "Well, shit, that guy's pretty good, and this guy's pretty good." And literally, I was just happened to be around it, and went in. I mean, fuck, dude, like you want to talk about like seizing the moment, and like I was thinking two things when you were talking, like the old proverb, like when the student's ready the master appears, which I fucking have said for years. But the other one is like there's little things that happen in your life, and like little conscious, unconscious decisions, things that happen that you look back that were so fucking pivotal. I mean, for me, I come in and start as a rookie, fucking ruptured my patellar tendon in my very first NFL start, and they took me in at surgery, reattached it, told me I'd probably never fucking play football again. And then in the offseason, they signed John Runyon at right tackle, which was the position I started at, to a $10 million fucking deal. And I was like, guess I'm not playing right tackle. So I show up at training camp, and I'm like the third string fucking left tackle. I'm like, I'm so far down the depth chart, dude. It was like, I was like, how did I go from being a starter to like this? And Runyon ends up tearing a intercostal rib muscle in practice, and so he's out. They're the $10 million guy. They're not going to fucking beat him up. And all of a sudden, they were like, they put in his backup, who was okay. And like the coach was like, "Hey John, didn't you used to play right tackle?" And I was like, "Yeah, I used to play right tackle." Like that's how fucking far down I was. And so they were like, "Hey, well, we'll put you at like second string right tackle." I'm like, "Okay." So then that guy goes out, and he ends up fucking kind of shit in the bed that first week of practice. I end up working my way in to being the starting right tackle while Runyon was out, and we go to the very first preseason game, and we're playing the Cleveland Browns in preseason. And I don't know if you'll remember this guy, but Courtney Brown was the #1 pick overall.
I blocked Courtney Brown, or more, if he had the longest arms in the world. He just put his hand on my helmet.
So he was the first pick overall of the draft, left defensive end, and I get to go play against him in the preseason. And I remember walking out there being like, if I can go out there and fucking shut this dude down or go out, I mean, we were only going to play, first, second, maybe at longest to the half. And I was like, you know what, they'll keep this guy in. I went out there and fucking raped this dude. I mean, it was his first NFL experience. He wasn't ready, all this shit. But I was like, fuck. So then I come in to the locker room, and all the press is fucking all over me. Like, oh my God, you went out there. He didn't have a tackle. He didn't have an assist. He didn't have a pressure. You fucking pancaked him. They were like, this was because the whole world was watching the #1 pick overall in his first fucking NFL deal. So then I go out and I get showcased in this, and they asked me, and they were like, are you upset that they signed Runyon to $10 million? I'm like, no, that guy's a fucking beast. He played in the Super Bowl. Like, that was I'd fucking pay him that money. And like the next day, as I'm like walking in, the general manager walks over, and he was like, all he said to me was like, "Thanks, you completely diffused the situation that could have got real bad." and he's like, and just so you know, we had over, I think it was like 10 or 12 different teams call to try to trade for me. So like all these teams like looked, and they were like, so he's like, I've been getting phone calls off the ringer, trying to trade for you. And I was like, oh, so am I getting traded? He's like, no. Like, okay.
Where's the contract then?
Yeah, exactly, right. So then I go to practice that next day, and the guy who was playing left guard for us got fucking blown up in 9-on-7. And all of a sudden, Andy Reid goes fucking ape shit and like starts yelling at him. And the next play, he gets fucking, they run the same play, gets blown up. It was like a little like counter tray, and he got fucking lit up by the three technique. He looks over his shoulder, and he's like, get the fuck out of there. And he looks over his shoulder. He's like, hey, Wellborn, get in there. I don't know the place. I've been playing right tackle. I don't know left fucking guard. So I go in there, and what do? I watch this idiot, fucking good guy, Doug Brzezinski. I watched him run the same play 2 plays in a row. What do they call? They call the exact same play the third play. And so I'm looking. I already saw what the dude did. So like I took a step and fucking just literally just dove as hard as I could. Ended up lighting up the three technique, knocking him down. We blow up 9-on-7, and we walk over to like a 1-on-1, like a 11-on-11 pass. Yeah. Dude comes out. He's totally in the tank. Gets beat by a swim move. Andy Reid fucking yanks and puts me in, and I've been playing tackle, so it's like once you play tackle, going to guard was cake, and I go out there and end up doing really good, and at the end of that practice, I was a starting left guard. Started there for the next 5 years, and the guy who was drafted the round ahead of me ended up being my backup for 4 years. So you never really think like these small little things happen, and it's almost like the opportunity presents itself, and you either have an opportunity to do well or not do well.
Yeah, and if you did shitty, you would never have remembered anything because it wouldn't have led to anything. I'm serious. Think about that.
No, it's true, and I'm sure, dude. There's been pivotal shit in your life where at the time you didn't think it would be that important. And it'd be, then all of a sudden years back you'd look and you're like, fuck, dude, that was a major, major deal in my life. Thank God I didn't fuck that one up.
Yeah, like when I got my wife pregnant.
Denny, what else we have for Jim?
Jim, you're still bitter about that, huh?
2 kids, I'm happy, man.
Nice. Is Denny still on?
Denny, you there?
Just to pile on that, we often talk about sport is 99% practice, 1% that game time, and you forget about the training. So we always talk about limiting factors and what's going to prevent you from being successful. So it's almost like, did your training prepare you for that moment? Yes or no, and you have no excuse. Did you do the job? Did you do the work? Did you put it in to take advantage of that opportunity? And the opportunity almost just falls in place because the work is done.
It's kind of one of the coaches always made sure the practices were always harder, and the training always. You want to make the training so hard that the game is easy.
Yeah, and fun.
The shit comes around, and that could be, it could be anything. You study so hard that by the time you take a test, it's easy. It's in your head. It can be applied to just about anything. The problem is not a lot of people have the drive and dedication to do, one or two things right, let alone a bunch of stuff right. But this is stuff that you learn a million times playing sports. And it's funny when a lot of people don't play the sports and they can't relate to it. They can't relate to the work that goes into a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I was listening recently to another podcast with some athletes, and they were talking about, well, how do I know if I'm really passionate about this sport? How do I know which sport to follow?
No, it picks you.
Exactly, and that what these guys were saying was that when it's passion, you don't have a choice. There is no am I passionate? You don't have a choice. You do, like, for instance, what John did and say, I'm going to 0 period at 7 a.m. I don't have a choice because it just happens. So to overthink it is just it's not for you if that's where you're at.
It's very funny because no matter what, whether it's training or art or painting or writing or whatever the hell you do, I can't relate to people that wouldn't die for what they do.
Yeah.
And people. I remember reading something. Some guys, basically it was some athlete or something. Talked about what he did, and some guy commented saying, "Man, I wish I could have passion for like that for anything." And I don't understand how isn't there one thing in your life that's you would do anything for?
Yeah.
I just, it's, like people always ask me about music and stuff like that. And they're like, how'd you get into it? I'm like, dude, in 1985, man, I heard Celtic Frost Procreation of the Wicked. I've never looked at I didn't like, oh, I like this music. It's like, fuck, that's it. That's what I need. I want the slow. Yeah. And then, even my parents, God bless them, they were always supportive of everything I've done with music and training and football and stuff, and they never dissuaded me. And I see a lot of people. I mean, imagine your kid coming home with shirts that say "I hate God" and bless the Luciferian rights and all this other stuff, and they're like, "Dang, that's at least you love it."
Kids being kids. Kids being kids.
Better than Taylor Swift.
Well, the other one too, which kind of trips me out. We run into this all the time. Like, I'll meet people, whatever, and they're like, hey, I'm getting into this weightlifting thing. And I'll be like, oh, how old are you? And they're like, oh, I'm
35.
Yeah, 35 or 40 years old. And I'm like, really? Fuck, that's like, what have you been doing the last 35 years of your life?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, did you play? No, I didn't play sports. I didn't do this. And I'm like, so at like 35 or 40, I'm like, you know what? God bless you. I'm glad you're fucking getting on the train. I remember, when I told my dad I wanted to lift weights, and I've told you guys this story, but my dad looked at me and he was like, lift weights? He's like, isn't that just counting to 10 over and over again? That's stupid. What are you ever going to do with that? And I was like, no, Dad, I think this lifting weights thing's going to go into something. And he was like, I think the dumb guys lift weights, because my dad's, super smart and an attorney and this shit.
Bob.
And I remember my dad, years later, I think after I signed my second contract, I bought my dad a twin turbo Porsche. And I remember when I tossed him the keys, I kind of nodded my head and I was like, yeah, that lifting weights thing, it kind of worked out, huh? And he was like, yeah, I'll gladly say I was wrong on that one. It definitely worked out, So there was, but like you said, like you start something young and you never know where it's going to blossom into. And dude, that just, so like, and I'm sure you fucking run into it. I mean, part of the thing I was trying to get Callie, I was like, you got to pump Jim for the strangest things that he's heard in relation to 531.
Yeah, so let's segue to that. The most cliche.
So I had a guy ask me if he he's like, hey, are you familiar with Jim's program? I'm like, yeah, we ran it, I've done it, I've read his books. I mean, yeah, I know. And they're like, I was subbing in 4-board bench press for overhead presses, and I was like, oh yeah, how'd it work? He's like, oh, it was great, it worked great. And I was like, so I was going to text you. I'll be like, hey, Jim, how do you sub in 4-board presses? Yeah. I had a dude hit me up about 531, and he was like, do you think it's okay if I sub out bench press off a 4-board for overhead presses? I was like,
when I said, whatever you have thought of, I've already thought of, and the fact that it's not in there is the reason why it's not in there.
We also had a guy who claims to take he's taken the 531 into dating, where he looks at it like, hey, I'm gonna hit on 5 girls, I'm gonna hit on 5 girls, and then I'm gonna hit on max girls. The next time I'm gonna hit on 5 girls or 3 girls, and then max girls. And then he goes,
I do that in confidence, John.
Yeah, he took the 531 approach and used it for dating.
Is this guy's name Jean Wellborn with an E?
Jean.
Oh my God. So I mean,
these things are on the internet. It's true if it's on the internet.
It's got to be true.
So I'm sure.
I had a guy tell me that he wrote it with me.
Oh, nice. He told you this.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, Jim, you remember we wrote 531 in your garage?
Yeah, I swear to God.
You were blacked out.
I forgot to tell you, some guy sent me a Bible for Christmas, and I am a staunch hater of religion and God, and I don't believe that stuff. And yeah, so it's not the first Bible I've been sent to.
Was he trying to save you?
Yeah. I've got a number of religious zealots try to save me.
Whoa.
I don't want to be saved, so go do it to someone.
Well, let's get back to this. So how did the guy write 531 with you?
I don't know. You can imagine some of the weird stuff. I've kind of I shut down my public email because it became like 10 for every one question. There was like 10 really weird things.
Yeah.
Okay, so I imagine a guy, bald, maybe in his late 50s, about 6'6", behind Jim, hugging him like he's teaching him how to play pool, but holding his forearm while he's actually writing the book.
Whoa, that's hot.
That's how I picture it.
Is that
weird?
And if you guys know that Jim has actually spawned his own group of individuals that I like to call Wendlerites.
Wendlerites?
So you would know Wendlerites based on the internet because they have shaved head, they have a beard, and their whole deal is just telling you how it is.
I thought
and more
those were
importantly,
Simmonsmen.
like being a tough guy and basically like use things, basically shit that Jim coined in his book and like his whole, his, who he is. These guys like saw the Wendler persona and realized that they could adopt and become a Wendlerite. So they shaved their head, they got a beard, they started training and they started lifting weights. And next thing you know, they're telling you how it is. And I classify those guys as Wendlerites.
I classify them as potentials.
I always get people who say they do Wendler, and I was like, my wife doesn't read this because it's dudes are doing me.
I actually, what's funny is people are like, oh yeah, I do Wendler. I was like, oh yeah, do you know Jimmy? I was like, because you know what, the guys that really do him, they just call him Jimmy. That's how it's like. I was like, that's how you go balls deep in Wendler. You call him. You Jimmy.
So let's get to something like seemingly relevant to our listening base.
So Jim, just so you know, our dynamic is when all of a sudden we fucking go off the rails, Callie pulls us back.
That's my dynamic. That's my role. So you know, what do you think about like the popularity of your training system in gyms, and then do you see like any misuse of it? So the interpretation of the training system and how it's fucked up.
Yeah, well, here's the thing is, like I wrote, you know, the book, and then I wrote all the training shit, and I came back and I realized, you know, after, I don't know how long I've been training at the time I wrote the book, but, you know, 24 years, I think, or 22 years, something like that. And I came back and I realized the 4 principles that I believe in, okay? And I couldn't, those are the only 4 that I could really put my spear down on, you know, and say these are mine and take a stand. And I think what happens is people don't understand the simple principles of it, you know, the 4 things, and when they start doing offshoots of it, or, you know, trying to do this and that, that's when they start fucking it up. Because it's infinitely, like this past 2 years, I'd say I've written more on the program than I've ever had. We've done so many different things, and tweet this and tweet that for whatever reason. You know, people contact me and, you know, on the forum and stuff like that. Hey, this is my issue, and I try and work it out. Plus, I got some kids here that I work with that are kind of my lab partners. You know, I just kind of figure shit out and do it on them. But they all are based on these 4 principles. And I think what happens is you see people, you know, think that they're doing, and that's fine because it's not my program, it's their body and their program. But, you know, there's a reason why I didn't do what they did. Like I said this before, you know, because it just doesn't work that well. And so yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, anytime you I mean, we could say this with religion. Every time you take a book and give it to people, it's gonna get misinterpreted in a number of different ways. And it used to bother me a lot more than it does now, because now, and this sounds really mean, I don't care. I don't, because it's not, I can't control it, and I don't. So what I do is, you know, then I've had people try to debate me on stuff. You know, hey, Bubba, this and that. And I'm like, I don't care, because I want to help people that want to use the program. That's it. And, you know, a lot of people will say, hey, I made this change, and I'll tell them good or bad, or, hey, this is a pretty good idea, I understand your problem. But yeah, there's always going to be a misuse. And like I said, it used to bother me. I guess what bothers me now is question, and they don't like it until they get the answer they want.
Right.
That fucking drives me nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Do you think the answer is the answer that a lot of people want is they're looking for a sexy answer?
No, the problem is that people want complicated.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
If something's too basic, they can't digest it.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's like this idea, like, hey, I'm going to ask you to come in. Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, we know percentages don't work, so I'm going to fucking skin away to, like, make the percentages work, like, take your ego out of it. And you know what? You're going to fucking do this last set to max reps, and next week, you know what? If you fucking got enough, you're going to go up in value. And it's based on this idea of doing a little bit more tomorrow than you did yesterday. And, like, fucking go in and, like, lift weights, but, like, it's like, you know, like, we run into this shit all the time. Kelly just did a consult with a guy, and it's like these, you know, like, people get so wrapped up in this idea of, like, you know, like microcycles, macrocycles, and all this shit, and you're like, dude, just go in with a fucking barbell and lift some fucking weights.
What ends up happening is there's 2 things. Is one, I think people think that they're special, and they think they need something other than what other people are using, or what, you know, maybe not the exact program, but something tried and true.
Right.
And I think, you know, people think, well, I'm a separate case, you know, I'm different, you know, I'm special, and they don't want to think that the, you know, stock program, or even something that I wrote for someone specifically, you know, that still has the same principles. Oh, that can't be me, because I can't do this, or I don't want to do this, or whatever.
Yeah, and you ask the person how long they've been training, and they're like, 2 years. I've been training 2 years.
Someone, like, you know, wrote me the other day and said, hey, you know, I've been doing first set last, you know, for some additional volume. I don't think blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, how many years have you done it? He's
right.
Like, 3 weeks. I'm like, well, you know what? You know, I always kind of use one of my favorite people is John Bros, and obviously him and I use completely different programs, different sports, everything. But he does 6 lifts. And I always tell people, I guess you're better than the world champions? No? So you need 12 lifts, because you're special, right?
Yeah.
And it's not, what I got from John Bros wasn't, maxing out every day or doing this. It was understanding that at the end of the day, it's going to be how much work you put in and how much work you're willing to put in a smart, consistent way over a long period of time. And yeah, it just and I'm almost 40 now, and you start to look back a little bit and you start to see the reality of the situation and about training, and you have a lot of people who are so impatient, and I don't have patience for that, because this is a long-term journey.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for the quick out, I'm not going to give it to you no matter how much you beg me. And I have this saying that, patient work yields fast progress. And as soon as someone really embraces the program, they always get wrapped up in the training max. I just had a guy, he pulled 700. His training max was 495. You do the math on that. The heaviest he pulled, this was in a prior to the competition, was 475. But it's the smart, consistent work over a long period of time that will yield results. And it's almost gotten to the point where I'm glad I've written so much that I can just say, read this article. Like, I'm not going to answer this because you need to read it.
I'm curious about that scenario. So that guy who pulled 700, when he went to compete, what was the approach? Did he just know? I don't know what your relationship is with him, but did he just know in his first lifts that he was going to smash it? How do you make a jump from 400 or 500 pounds to 700 at a competition?
That's we employ joker sets through some of it, and then obviously the more experience you get, like my good friend Kevin just did a meet. He did one single at 475 and he squatted 650. He could have easily squatted 700. Easily. It was his first meet back. It's just being smart and trusting your training. They tell you that all the time in football. You got to trust, the work that you put in. And when I first developed the program, I did it completely selfishly because I was tired of thinking about stuff and thinking, this, and so I just put it in, put some numbers in, and I'd say for 3 months I always pushed the less set at this time, but I never went to failure or anything like that. I just pushed it hard for a PR, and I left. And this is in the book. I ended up pulling I lost 50 pounds or something from when I was competing. I pulled 610 or 615 for a double or triple, and I don't think I did anything over 440. And I started experimenting with some friends, and everyone to a T did very well as long as the training max was below, and that's what it took me about a year to figure that out.
What would you think? It's kind of goes back to that compensatory acceleration that because I know you're in the same camp I am, where it's like, hey, dude, I am not impressed by people moving weight slowly. Like every time we touch a barbell, I'm trying to move at max velocity.
There's a couple things. One is if you're smart about it, and this is something that needs to be learned over time, that you cut the set off either at a PR or when the speed's gonna suck. But that doesn't apply to everyone because my wife is very slow twitch, and her first rep looks like her 18th rep. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different. But I think what ends up happening is you can train for a long time and not feel burnt out. Because training, you have to understand, training isn't about how many buckets of sweat you can get or how many awesome sayings you can put on a T-shirt or what your scars are like. It's about the whole 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And if you can continue to go into the weight room and feel good rather than feeling wiped out.
Yeah, it's training. That's just what it is.
And it's not a dick measuring contest, and that's what it ends up being. I call it myopic training. They just get so closed-minded to everything, and it's about today. And you see it all the time, especially with the New Year's thing. Let's just take the regular person, but it can apply to 99% of people who are serious. is they go in on like a Monday, New Year's Eve or whatever, and they train really hard because it's the big thing. And then what happens? They're so goddamn sore that they can't do anything. Okay? And so what ends up happening, then you're just not doing anything. It's pointless training because if you're not lifting, it doesn't matter. So if we've actually come up with a way to manipulate the volume perfectly between medium, light, and heavy with the exact volume that you need for each lift. And we've expanded the 5-3-1 program much farther using this method than I ever thought possible. We're using, we only do max reps on certain weeks, in a 6-week cycle. We've changed all that. So it's really come leaps and bounds over the original. Now, having said that, okay, I just had my spine fused. I was in a horrible motorcycle accident about 3 years ago, okay? And the back pain was debilitating to the point where I couldn't walk. And you don't know what humility is until your wife has to fucking lift the toilet seat up for you, has to dress you in the morning. And I still found ways to train and stuff like that, but I still used the original 5-3-1 program, and I'm going to get to why this is important. I live for we talk about competing and stuff. I live for that moment when you approach the bar and you don't fucking know, and I'm nervous as shit because I don't like to fail. And so I love that style of training. It's not for everyone, and that's why we've come up with all these different programs. I thought everyone wanted to be competitive in the weight room. I thought everyone wanted to break PRs, but I also understand that's not everyone's wired that way. So fast forward to my surgery, okay? I don't know if anyone's had their spine fused, but all the pain went away that the back was causing, except I have a hole in my back. And within hours of the surgery, I stood up, the doctor, the PT came in and said, well, let's take a walk around and see how you do. And I walked for like a half mile. This is just hours after the surgery. And the reason why I had that mentality, of setting a PR, of going all out, was because of that training for so long, for so many years. And so I see how this, I'm getting a little bit older now. You start to be a little wiser and more mature, but I see how that style of training is carried over to everything I do. And I understand that maybe it's not the best thing all the time, but it's the best thing for me because it fills emotional and physical need that I do. So training isn't just for me about lifting X amount of weight or doing this. It's about the challenge. Because honestly, after football or after the military, there's very few people in America especially, that are challenged themselves physically and mentally to the point where it gets scary. And this is all we got is training, and that's what I feed off of. So it's a little bit bigger than what I think how most people would train. But having said that, that's the base of the program, and I train some kids out here. We only train them twice a week. We only do the basic lifts. We do some we call it first set, last stuff to get a little bit more volume in. And we just had a kid yesterday squat 185 for 5. Okay, he could barely squat 95 pounds when he came in here. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. This was 4 months ago. He hasn't used anything on the bar heavier than 145. But we're just consistent and consistent and consistent. We drive the form. We make sure everything's good. Everything is fast. And, look what happens. I mean, he's complete. He's also in the military. He's going to be an ROTC. His attitude in life. I've had teachers. Remember, he's a kid, lives down the street. I live in a normal suburban neighborhood. And I have teachers coming up to me that, I live in a small town. Like, his attitude, his demeanor, his walk is completely different now. You have completely changed this kid. And so there's more to train than just, lifting the weight or, trying to get, ripped abs or whatever kids do. I don't fucking know. I don't care. But so that, I know I'm kind of going off topic and I apologize. But
no, it's all good.
That's our whole podcast is just going off the fucking rails. So please, run off the rails.
So what ends up happening is I've developed so much more of the program to be a little smarter, okay? And we've done a lot of different stuff where we can really manipulate we have 6-week cycle now. We can completely manipulate volume based on how you feel that week, and you can choose a different week. I mean, it's unbelievable what we can do. We can even choose days, and based on bar speed. And
so it's like auto-regulation. So you found a way to basically auto-regulate. You walk in that day, and it's
Daily
like,
matrix.
well, it's like you call it the Joker, dude. I call it the gambler, where it's like you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. You walk in and you fucking go for it. And other days you survive. So I mean, it's just, I mean, that's training.
90% of your training is going to be surviving or getting just a little bit over for a lot of people. People don't understand it. They think every day is going to be a fucking lottery day.
Fuck.
You have to train. And you have to, you want to really reach this sense of normalcy in the train that when you do go balls out finally, you have all that built up interest or credit or whatever the fuck you want to call it.
Yeah.
The problem is everyone spends, and this is, I guess, a metaphor for life because no one saves any money. You know, the old joke is the only people that save is Jesus, you know. Jesus saves. But they just throw everything away on each workout and they don't understand the ramifications of it. You see it with conditioning all the time. I mean, people go apeshit with conditioning. And I'll give you a good example. I push the prowler 3 times a week, 10 to 12 trips, okay? And then on my 34th birthday, I pushed it 34 fucking times in the low handles, okay, for 40-yard sprints. I didn't do it once over, 10 to 12. I just consistently built myself up. And by the time I did the 34 sprints, I got to 10 to 15, and I didn't breathe any harder at 10 to 15 than I did at 30 to 34. And the problem with conditioning is, and this is kind of going off the rails again, is people don't understand when you do hard conditioning. I'm not talking about taking a walk or whatever, riding an Airdyne. I love that thing, stuff like that. When you do, I love the Airdyne.
Yeah.
I have a few.
The assault bikes are fucking great.
But, when they do the prowler or hills or shit like that, it's as stressful as a workout. And what ends up happening is they don't account for that because and they go ape shit. I want to tell everyone, it's okay if you don't throw up after you condition or you don't feel like you're going to die.
Yes.
Now, when you're out of shape, there's always going to be that thing where you're going to be shitty for a while. But once you get in fairly good shape, you're going to be okay just knocking away a little bit at the rock, the big boulder. And you don't have to always increase it. I call it the Iron Mind mentality. You ever read the magazine Iron Mind?
Oh, yeah.
All the programs in there like, just add 5 more pounds a week, you'll be fine. Yeah.
Move the dirt.
Dude, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And so if you're consistent with the conditioning, no matter what you're doing, your body will eventually adapt and you'll be okay, but you don't have to kill yourself. I love using the prowler because it's easy to recover from. But if you load that thing up heavy enough and work your legs, something's going to break on your lifting day, so that needs to be accounted for. Another thing that drives me bananas is, let's say a person does workout X, whatever workout X is, and then they're like, I'm going to do fucking prowler pushes 4 days a week. If you're going to add that in, then something's going to have to come out of your weight work.
Yeah.
In order for you to maintain or gain strength. But instead, they just keep on building and just piling more shit. You with young kids all the time, right? They bench press, then they read an article about incline, like fucking incline. Then they do dumbbell flies, but they don't take anything out. They just pretty soon they're doing 30 movements.
It's called the Christmas tree program. You just keep adding ornaments to your tree, and then it's like, and anybody knows this, like when you first move into your house, or you first put up your first Christmas tree, you have like 10 ornamants, and then all of a sudden, like 10 years later, your tree is just like a clusterfuck of humanity. And,
so this is a topic really close to my heart because I'm constantly fascinated with why people do that, and my philosophy is that part of it is that we're such an instant gratification type of culture, and we don't see the long-term goals. Instead, we know if X makes us feel good, then X to the second power, or X times 2 is going to make us feel even better. And we see it as like this linear thing when it's really, that's not the way, in terms of physiologically speaking, that's not the way our body's going to adapt. That's not sustainable. And yet we still do it. And I don't know if it's because of the feeling of being strong.
It's like drinking. If one shot's good, 2 shots.
That's a fact.
If 10 deep ball tabs is good.
if a gram of test is good, 2 is better.
Yeah. 2 grams of test, that's maintenance, dude. That's maintenance. But the funny thing about
lasting cruise.
Yeah. Yeah, going to Tijuana. You were in San Diego. You know how that shit goes.
I was in Orange County.
Yeah, I used to live in Arizona. I know how it goes. Anyway, the interesting thing about, we talk about instant gratification, and I mentioned a little bit, about people having thinner skin these days. But I'm always amazed if people would actually take a step back and actually think about it for like 10 seconds. I always say most of your problems can be solved if you took a shit and just thought. If you really just thought about it, like, do you really think, walking up and down a hill with a 45, a bar with 135 isn't going to have some kind of negative effect on your squat workout tomorrow? No. And they always say, well, John Bros squats 8 days a week. Well, it took him 4 years to get there.
And he does nothing else.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, those guys do nothing else. I mean, he doesn't fucking run. He doesn't condition. Like, they just fucking squat. And that's because their fucking job when you Olympic weightlift is to squat.
I don't know. One of the questions was asked, what's missing in a lot of programs. I'm not exactly sure what it was. But,
Common sense?
Yeah. Well, I wrote something called a weak point train article. And I approach weak points not from a muscle standpoint. Like, the reason why your bench sucks is because your triceps are weak. Because if you actually believe in the weak point, that theory, that means it's not your programming sucks, because you should be able to, people are like, I think my lats are weak. Well, what the fuck you been doing for 4 years? No rows and runs?
Like, that shouldn't exist. Yeah.
And the other thing that drives me bananas about that is people ignore their strengths. Dude, if I'm a fast athlete, I'm not going to not work on my speed. I'm going to work on that and make sure it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people who get mad, like, this guy squatted 900 and he only deadlifted 6.
Good, he should squat 1,000 when he only has to deadlift 600 pounds in total.
Yeah, in their minds, they would rather squat 500 and pull 500 than squat 900 and pull 500. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why don't you be a little freakish? But anyway, I talk about the weak point thing, and what I did was, instead of talking about muscles, I have a 10-point system that for each 6-week phase, we have either consistency or performance goals and 10 different things. And for example, a consistency goal would be like, I'm going to do the DeFranco Agile 8 3 times a day, because there's not really a performance goal for stretching. I'm not going to sit and reach on a fucking box. And but even with like diet and supplements and stuff like that, what's your goal? Well, my goal is to consistently eat, 1 whole chicken a day, and that, I think, is the biggest thing, is people just think about the lifting portion when there's actually probably a lot of ways you can do this, but I came up with 10 different ways. And what ends up happening is we set small, reasonable goals each of these 6-week periods. And it doesn't have to be huge. Like, it could be, listen, I'm just going to get all my requisite reps, and then I'm going to push this one little exercise, and that's all I'm going to do. And over time, if you keep on setting and reaching these 10 performance or consistency goals over time, great things happen. And but that's what I think is missing, is there's no reasonable goal setting and plan having in a small period of time that will build up over a large period of time. That's what I think is missing. It drives me nuts.
Some of the parts. That's kind of like what John says, and we say it's that training system being a sum of all of those parts and all those kind of the micro goals.
Well, people also too, they always look for like specific things, like the reason I don't squat well is because of this, and I'm like, well, you know what, like, things don't really necessarily kind of grow independent, but and then you watch a guy squat and you're like, dude, your legs aren't weak, it's just the fact that you have such a shitty upper back that you can't support the fucking weight. Then obviously we got to fucking kind of go in that direction a little bit. But what's kind of interesting with the training, and it doesn't matter if it's like 5 through 1 or what the training you want to find, is that over time, the training just really clears away the pieces, and you really get to see who people are, because like, everybody can do it for 6 weeks. Everybody can do it for maybe even fucking 12 weeks. But when you start talking about like years, and like I love new lifters that come in and like they're like, oh man, this program doesn't work. I didn't set a PR, and I'm like, you know what? I didn't set a PR in the last 3 years in fucking anything. I've gotten weaker in my squat for the last 3 years, and then all of a sudden my squat went up, but it didn't
I'm not
stop
injured.
me from fucking going in there. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I've had 60s.
I get questions all the time about, dude, last Friday, man, I just didn't get the workouts, and what do I do? And I'm like, well, how many months has this gone on? Well, it went Friday. John made a good point. Like, I had a bad workout. I have a bad year.
Yeah. Have a beer and come back on Monday.
Dude, my knee was so fucked up at one point that the only thing that I could do was fucking barbell hip thrusts. It was the only thing, and those will actually, I'm pretty sure, give you AIDS, so I'd probably have HIV or something with it. But
I gotta edit that out.
Yeah, she'll put that out. But like literally, I was like on the internet being like, I can't fucking do anything, and the only thing I could find, I was like, you know what? So I wrapped this thing up. I mean, it crushes your pelvis, and it was terrible, but like it was enough to keep me going until my knee got better. And I remember being like, I was at barbell hip thrusts. That's my lowest point in life.
I think Jim beats you on his back though.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't know your back was fused, and two, or that you had to do that. But also, dude, fuck man, that's all of my buddies, and I can put you in that have had fucked up backs. It is like the worst fucking experience of their life. I mean, dude, like it's like living with back pain is the worst thing ever. And every one of them that's got their back fixed is like, it was as if like I got fixed, I could have like run a fucking marathon that day. Because after living through that fucking hell, there was, when the pain went away, all of a sudden I was a normal person again.
One of the great things about the internet is the resounding these fake doctors. I can fix your back. All you got to do is the Stuart McGill sit-up and all this baloney. And I understand that people shy away from surgery, but they make it sound like it's going to cure everything. And I got dragged 100 yards down a fucking highway.
Oh.
No helmet, no jacket, nothing. And I got some kid was fucking texting, and he smashed into my motorcycle, and I got fucking killed almost. I don't know how I survived.
Oh my God.
These people have the audacity to tell some people. Remember, all their experiences is they picked up a barbell twice last year. That they can fix this or fix that.
Yeah.
I actually had a doctor tell me that the surgery will never work. My wife has been with me for 5 years now, and she was pregnant with my son when I got hit. From that point on, she could never take my thigh and shake it, because the way that my injury was, that my whole calf, glutes, and quads were completely tense all the time. It was like living with the worst cramp in your body.
Yeah.
What was one of the discs herniated?
Yeah, that was one of the many things. The doctor actually came in. He took a look at my X-ray, and he came in and started laughing. He said, what is your pain tolerance like right now? I'm like, I don't know. I guess it's all right. He's like, dude, there's no way you should be fucking walking right now. None. And he's like, I'm impressed. So to make a long story short, my wife and I, right when I woke up from the surgery, we're just watching TV, and she puts her hand on my leg, and all of a sudden my quad moves, and she's like, I've never felt anything like this. And of course, everyone tells you you're going to die from surgery. It's going to be the worst thing ever. I feel like a fucking $1 million. And that's been, I felt like $1 million a week after the surgery.
That's great.
And I'm able to walk. I'm able to do it. I mean, I can't lift because I have to wait for everything to heal up, but I can do some stuff.
Yeah.
And but I have no back pain. None.
Congratulations, dude.
That's phenomenal.
Dude, I remember when you got in that accident, and I remember you, that was after we had met up, and I remember talking to you on the phone, and you were like, yeah, dude, I got fucking lit up, and I didn't know that it had fucked you up that bad and that you'd have to live with it that long.
Don't ever get road rash taken out of you, by the way.
Yeah, no, I've had road rash, dude. My jeans, that's a part about riding in jeans. I went down and dude, the jeans grabbed my fucking skin and took it the fuck off. Dude, did they take a piece of bone out of your hip and fuse it? Did they resect it? What happened?
They did. They took out part of the bone in the back, and then obviously it's held together by a bunch of screws, and they fused part of it It wasn't part of my hip. No, they took part of the back.
So was it like L4, L5, S1?
S1, L5, and I had I had spondylolisthesis. I had a whole bunch of things that all kind of went away, and but yeah, it's the funny. I'd like to make a video or something on this, but it's not a death sentence. People are like, you're never gonna lift again. I could eat, but by the end of the first week, I was able to do a full body weight squat with no repercussions. Now it's just a matter of me healing and being smart.
Yeah.
I can walk with a weight vest. I do that to help strengthen my back and my abs and stuff like that. But
there's this training.
What's that?
Do you think that was a motivator? The kind of doctors saying you will never walk again, or people saying that?
No, I don't. I had that kind of attitude maybe when I was like in high school and college and stuff like that. But honestly, it's not. I don't want to give anyone power. I want the drive to come from me. And anytime, and people are like, that girl said I'd never amount to anything. That's cool when I was, younger. Now I never, I don't, anyone negative or anything, I just don't even give them the fucking time.
Yeah, that's smart. I was gonna say there's a good training quote that I made up and I like to live by. It's patient work yields fast progress. So maybe think about that.
That's pretty heady. Did you scrape that?
I just made
wonderful.
it up.
Sounds awfully familiar. Yeah, but it's just Johnny talked about doing the hip thrust and stuff, and Buddy Morris once told me, when you're hurt, you got to train what is trainable. And people are always like, dude, I fucked up my shoulder. What do I do? I'm like, I don't know. What you need to do is go on the
What
web.
can you do?
Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah, what can you do?
A bunch of stuff, and whatever doesn't hurt, just do it like it's your job.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, dude, my shoulder's fucked up. I can't really overhead press, so I can find the actual exact angle on the incline dumbbell that actually works for me. And you know what? That's what I fucking hammer.
Yeah.
And found the shit out of that, and then I remember when I tore both my shoulders. Only thing I could do was alternating dumbbell upright row.
Oh, it's a good workout.
I became the king. I was like a piston pumping those things.
Wow.
Dude, I know that well. That's one of our fucking favorites. You're just like bing, 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 bing.
Sorry, as we kind of wind things down, I was just curious as to some of your plans or goals or things that you have on the front of 2015.
Well, I got 2 books I want to get done. One is going to be some of the stuff that we've done we call it From Average to Athlete, and it's not for athletes. It's about for the regular people who want to put stuff in their training that's not going to, it's not horribly complex, but that allows them to get some more jumping in, some more throwing, some more agility, simple agility work, and stuff that will carry over to, people always say this, this stuff doesn't matter to lifting. Then why, if you teach an athlete how to do something, they pick it up much faster than the average slob.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they have all these tools and all these different things. And I think it's important as you get older to do some of this stuff that maybe, isn't being preached by Joe Powerlifter or whatever. And within that, I have so many different things I've written with different templates and different ways. There's probably right now 15 or 20 different 5-for-1 variations now that we've come up with that's totally different than the regular program. Got that, and then obviously, personally, I have me and my friend Vincent DeCenzo are going to do an old man meet where we do the trap bar, deadlift, safety squat bar, and the football bar.
Yes, that's amazing. What a great idea.
So,
dude, John wants to get in on that.
Those are my wheelhouses.
Yeah, and it's funny because all these. I love how these kids. They tell you, oh, a trap bar deadlift's not a deadlift. It's like, no shit, I don't care. I'm picking off the ground, and you know what? I paid my dues, and this is how I want to train. And we have a blast because we're always comparing different stuff. And and then this summer, my band's actually going to the studio, and we're recording slab of satanic metal or whatever the hell you want to call it. So,
does your band have a website?
I got a Facebook page or something.
Oh, nice. What's the name of your band?
It's called the Wendlerites.
Yeah. It's called Locust Whip. It's a play on an Iron Monkey song.
Cool.
That was Callie's nickname in college.
Yeah.
Locust Whip.
What, Iron Monkey?
Iron Monkey.
Yeah.
Well, I would love for this to go on and on because there seems to be a real passion for the music side. We could totally break that off into a whole nother hour-long show, it seems like. But I think we probably need to cut it here in terms of recording. So, sadly.
Well, maybe we'll have to hit up Jim and get him back on a second time, so at least we can.
I would love to be on.
Jim, we courted you for so long, and I'm so glad that you finally submitted.
I don't.
Well, it takes a long time to do Wendler.
Yeah,
you got to be patient to do Wendler.
Yeah, thanks for slumming it with us.
You have to understand, I'm an incredibly private person. I don't answer my phone. I'm very. I just kind of live in my own little world. It's no disrespect. I don't check my emails. I have like 25,000 unread emails. I prefer to live like in the real world. I know it sounds really weird, but I made a decision to kind of stop most of the internet stuff just because I want to live a life.
Yeah, absolutely, and not just experience it through being on a computer. You want to actually live one, which is unusual, but we respect that.
Fuck. Wow, that's fucking. I mean, that's such a novel thing. I'm just amazed somebody still does that. Right?
I know. Well, honestly, we are very grateful, and I know that our listeners are going to be super grateful to hear from you. So, thanks a ton for chatting with us for like 2 hours.
All right, amigo, we're gonna cut it here, dude.
All right, man. Take it easy, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
All right, you guys take it easy, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Are you dreading Valentine's Day? Maybe it's because you have absolutely no idea what to get your siggo. Or it could be because your only plans for romance include some, quote, me time. Because, you really have to, learn to love yourself before you can love someone else. Well, whether you want to show the old ball and chain that you care, or you're in need of the perfect peacocking ensemble, let Power Athlete help you out this Valentine's Day. Just a reminder that for 1 week prior to Lover's Day, we will empower you to dictate the discount amount by encouraging others to follow us on social media. For every 100 new followers, we will discount an additional 1% on all apparel through the weekend of February 14th. Give love, get savings. That's all for episode 93. Stay tuned to Power Athlete Radio in the coming weeks for our most recent interview with Rob Wolf. Bye!